And so these first set of questions are the community question. Well, they're the community and the audience, and then we go to the parents secondary after this one.
And
Nice and cold.
Larry's staying the night shift, so pleasure to meet you.
All right. Larry,
We're live.
staying with me.
We're live, sir.
You're live.
Okay.
Thank you. Good evening, Dr. Gadsden. A pleasure to welcome you back. You've spent a lot of time in that seat, and we're thrilled to have you.
Thank you.
So this evening, with your community before you, or potential community, and obviously, as you know, because you've been through this, it's live, it's being streamed, etc. We're going to go through a series of questions. You're going to respond. We're going to try to keep this within roughly 50 minutes, 50. And as we go through that, I will keep you abreast of kind of time frames just to be helpful. But this is, this is your time. You have control of the agenda, and by time frames, that'll help you get a hold of your answers and the length. But most importantly, I think your community, your potential community, would like to hear from you about who you are, how'd you get here, and what do you hope to do? So please share your story, as one would say.
So I am Timothy Gadsden, proud son of Timothy Gadsden Jr. and Betty Gadsden, and grandson of Alberta McLeod. I mentioned my 95-year-old grandmother because it was she who predicted that I would be an educator. And so my grandmother would ask me to read to her as a young man. And one day I jokingly shared with my grandmother that I couldn't read to her. And she asked me why. I shared because I couldn't read. Well, my grandmother quickly scolded me and shared with me that not being able to read was no laughing matter. At that time, my grandmother shared a story with me that she had to leave school early on and work in the fields to help her family. And because she had limited formal education, she couldn't read well. And so that was a shock and surprise to me as a young boy to know that my grandmother did not have the level of literacy that I had. And so she shared with me that reading would open doors for me and that I was going to be a teacher one day. And so fast forwarding, I went on to college, majored in business economics, planned to be a corporate powerhouse and make all of the money that was out there as quickly as I could and retire early. I lived in Florida, so that was a great retirement spot, and I just had my life planned. Well, as I was going into my junior year, the dean of the College of Education called me and several other Black males from across the university to a meeting. And at that meeting, he shared that there was a need for more Black males in education. And so, of course, we were all bewildered. We wondered why he was sharing that with us. None of us were education majors. And he made a deal that I couldn't refuse. And many of my peers at that time accepted the deal as well. He shared that we could keep our major. We didn't have to change our major at all. He wanted us to enroll in secondary education courses and that he would pay for our junior and senior year if we did that. And so, of course, I accepted that offer, did my student teaching, graduated, and got hired with Trust Company Bank and signed a no-compete clause with them. My mother got ill and I had to go home to help my family, and Trust Company Bank refused to allow me out of the no-compete clause, even though I had never started a day on the job. And so I needed to do something. We are not a wealthy family. I knew I needed to work, and I wondered what I was going to do. And I remembered that teaching certificate that I had earned and started teaching, not because I wanted to, but because I had to, and quickly fell in love with it. Just the passion of my students, are crying some days because of the experiences they would share with me. Every day being a new day and being exciting to me, and being able to touch my own future was enticing, and still is enticing to me. And so, as I said, I started teaching and never looked back. In my professional capacity, I have served as a teacher, assistant principal, and principal, district director of secondary curriculum. I have been a chief transformation officer with a private transformation company, and currently serve as an associate superintendent with Anoka Hennepin School District in Minnesota. I've served in districts large, small, and medium, the largest being 212,000 students, the smallest being just under 13,000. And what all of those districts had in common was students that needed quality and effective instruction. And I'm glad that I was a part of the team, a leader that was able to make that happen for our students. I've been successful in improving educational outcomes for students as we work to narrow the achievement gap. And I've been successful in increasing the graduation rate for students. And so that's who I am, and that's what I'm about. But I would like to share with you all, in the spirit of transparency, that a Google search of my name shows a settlement that I received from Henry County Schools in Georgia. I was named sole finalist there in 2017, and the board decided to rescind this offer after some action in the community that was not positive. And so I sought to work with the board to resolve those issues. And when I couldn't, I sought help, and that resulted in a settlement. And so I wanted to share that with you as well.
Thank you, Dr. Gadsden. Great to have you for about the fifth time, but we're so pleased to be the sixth time, whatever it is. All right. So these are questions that have come forth between parents and communities, and we will ask you. We have a good solid 45 minutes. So, at the same time, you will determine, the brevity being the soul of wit. So we'll move forward from that. Okay. First question. Trust has been tested this year across many areas. How do you go about rebuilding trust with the stakeholders?
And so honesty, transparency, and trust are extremely important to me, and integrity. And that means simply to me what you do when no one is watching. And so the person that I am now is the same person that I am at home with my one-year-old child, in schools, when I'm visiting, and in the community. And so being consistent is one way that I build trust. Being reliable, communicating and being open with that communication is always important. Listening to what stakeholders have to say, partnering and involving them in the decision making, and providing rationales for the decisions that I make. Also making sure that the decisions that I make are focused on students and families and are respectful of students and families are ways that I work to build that trust.
Thank you. So as we move to the next question, I love this one, actually. How will you show the kids that you are here for them?
Being visible, being in schools, showing up at events, hosting town hall meetings. One of the things that I do in my current district, and I'm so proud of it, is I visit schools regularly and have town hall meetings with students. This is when I find out what students' concerns are. This is where I find out how I can help make the learning experience, the educational experience for students better. And so being visible, showing up, not being afraid to talk with students, and not just hearing what they say, but actually listening to what they say, and then allowing them to see what they've shared with you in action. And when you can't do what they're asking you to do, be honest and share that you can't, and then provide a rationale for why you can't. So that consistent visibility, my presence, will help students to understand that I'm there for them at community events, extracurriculars, during the school day, and out in the community.
Thank you. All right, moving on, and we're going to cover a number of areas which wouldn't surprise you, given the fact that the community has all kinds of, informed, legitimate perspectives, and they really love their schools and want to know who their next leader is going to be. School is often considered a safety net, allowing for counseling, food, additional support, and straight up childcare. How would you plan to maintain these safety nets or others that you know of if or when another crisis occurs? Which is really interesting.
And so I think it's important that the school district is present in the time of crisis, and that the school district supports families by providing meals, childcare, shelter when it's necessary. And I know that that's some of the work that is already being done in the district through food pantries, providing clothing for students that need it. And so also our community learning centers, where we're providing after school programming for our students and Head Start programming. So continuing to support the Education Foundation is one way, continuing to partner with outside agencies and organizations. One project that I would like to bring to Salt Lake City and work on as a personal project of mine is providing mental health therapists in each of our schools. The pandemic has been extremely hard on our students, and the mental health issues that have arisen as a result of that and the trauma that our students have experienced. We need to have strong individuals, trained individuals on our campuses that are able to provide support for our students. And the way that I would do that is the way that it's done in my current district through a combination of grants, donations from philanthropists, district funding, and billable hours. So I definitely want to work on that project because I think that's something that will be needed as our students are returning to school.
Thank you, sir. During the pandemic, many students were using computers for the first time. What is your plan for continued digital literacy and computer access?
So I know that the district provided hotspots for students, provided devices. And so I would continue the work that the district has done. We had staff that actually visited homes to help families set up those hotspots if that was needed. We had helplines where families were able to call in and get support from district staff. I would continue that as well. The district should provide that support and provide choice for families that want to continue with remote learning. And it's our responsibility to make sure that we provide the support and resources for families to be able to do that.
Thank you, sir. Please describe your experience with implementation of restorative practices for low level and high level discipline issues?
So currently in my district, we are implementing our restorative practices. And I was just having a conversation about the importance of students learning from any disciplinary experience and not just receiving suspension or in-school suspension or whatever the action is going to be and being done with that. It's important that we help students understand when there's harm that they cause in the environment and being able to take responsibility for that and being able to hear how the person that was the recipient of whatever that action was felt and what it did to them. I've participated in some restorative circles that have been powerful, where even the hardest students have cried when they've heard how their actions have impacted others, and they explain that it wasn't their intention or that they were sorry, they were remorseful for what they've done. And I think that's extremely important to allow a student to take responsibility, to apologize if that's what he or she chooses to do, but to repair that harm and to learn from that experience. And so that is the work that is being done under my leadership in my current district.
Dr. Gatson, we have plenty of time. I mean, we're ahead of schedule. So just to give you a chance to take a breath, take a sip of water. Please describe your experience coordinating with local law enforcement and/or school resource officers.
And so every district that I've worked in, we have had school resource officers. And while there's some controversy on whether you should have law enforcement in schools or not, I think the benefit of them is creating a safe environment, being able to respond to a crisis incident when necessary. It cuts down on the response time to law enforcement if they are needed on a campus, because that resource officer is able to call out and get that support. But also the resource officer is supposed to be a teaching resource as well, helping to educate students about the law and their rights and be a positive image for them, for law enforcement, so that students don't develop a fear or have a one-sided view of what law enforcement is all about. So they're able to serve as a positive element for students. It's important that administration doesn't put resource officers in a position where they're serving as quasi-administrators in the building, and there's role confusion. The law enforcement officer or a resource officer is there for a specific person, and it's important that we utilize them in that way, and that administrators take on the roles that they've been appointed to take on in schools, and that we keep those lines extremely clear. But I see the positives in school resource officers and ensuring that those expectations are laid out, and when you develop the contract, that those expectations for what the officer will and will not do are extremely clear.
Thank you, sir. Next question. As the majority of the Salt Lake City School District students and families are of various races, nationalities, and socioeconomic backgrounds, describe a time when you became aware of any biases that may have come through on how you interact and serve students or their parents. How have you made adjustments according to that recognition? And I'm happy to repeat parts as you would like.
Yes, if you could repeat the question for me.
No, absolutely. It's a mouthful. It's a mouthful. As the majority of Salt Lake City's school district students and families are of various races, nationalities, and socioeconomic backgrounds, describe a time when you became aware of any biases. we could leave it there. The editorial side is that have come through in how you interact and serve students or parents. So the first part is describe a time when you became aware of any biases. And the second part is how have you made adjustments according to that recognition? Is
And
that
so-
helpful?
yes. So in my
Okay.
journey to be anti-racist and in my equity, diversity, and inclusion work, I constantly reflect on my own personal biases. I have not been made aware of the perception of any biases that others have picked up on or made me aware of. But what I will say, if those biases were brought to my attention, I would ask the observer to share more information. I would seek to get as much detail as I could for my own self-reflection. I would reflect on those biases and really try to understand uh, how and what my actions were and what I said that gave that perception. And so in reflecting and seeking more detail and reflecting, it would help me to become more conscious of those biases, and bringing them to my conscious mind could help me work through and extinguish those biases so that they did not impact any future interactions with families.
Thank you. All right, sir. Next question. Trust has been tested this year across many areas. How do you go about rebuilding trust with our stakeholders and others?
Communicate clearly, building relationships incrementally so that I'm able to build that trust. Do more listening than talking. That's extremely important. Be genuine and sincere because people can see through fake facades. Be efficient and effective and reliable. You've got to be consistent. When people feel they can rely on you and you're consistent, they can trust that. My grandmother says all the time, it's about a pattern of behavior, and you establish a pattern of behavior where people can see and not hear. If you have to tell them that they can trust you, your actions aren't speaking louder than your words. And I'm one that believes that actions should speak louder than words. And always avoid playing favorites because that gets you in a lot of trouble. And that's what I would do.
How will you show the children that you are here for them?
Just being present, speaking with students, communicating with students, being able to help them understand who I am in my decision making, making sure that my decision making is student-based, student-oriented. When you do what's right for students, and again, your actions speak louder than your words, students will hear that. But being able to interact with students in the community, being able to interact with them at extracurricular activities, interacting with them during the school day, and being open and approachable will prove to them that I'm here to support them.
Thank you. How will the superintendent ensure equitable access and inclusion for students with disabilities? Please refer to the components of the inclusion resolution passed last spring, if you're aware, but the most important part is the front end. How will the superintendent ensure equitable access and inclusion for students with disabilities?
Uh, so I am aware of the inclusion resolution.
Okay, wonderful.
And I think the district definitely took a bold step in the drafting and the approval of the resolution. And so if appointed superintendent of Salt Lake City School District, it would be my responsibility to carry out the work that the board is expecting staff to do to follow what's in that inclusion. And that's to work to eliminate barriers to student success for our students with disabilities, to provide training for staff in inclusive practices, and make sure that we work to make sure those practices are implemented district-wide, that we focus on academic, social, and physical inclusion of all students, and that we guide all in becoming, helping to make the district a model for the implementation of inclusive practices. And then the board would expect me to recommend policies and procedures that would help further the inclusion work. As a licensed special educator myself, I again think the board was very bold in this resolution. The last thing the board is expecting is an annual update on the progress that's being made to implement inclusive practices and ensure that students are in the least restrictive environment. And I take pleasure in that, because it's work that has to be done. And I'll end on stressing that it's my position, and I make clear to educators that students with disabilities are first and foremost general education students. And so we must ensure that for the most time possible, that students are in an inclusive environment. That is the least restrictive environment. It is guided by their IEP, and the decision is made by the IEP team on the minutes and the services that students will receive in that environment. But I trust that our educators will do the right thing by students.
Thank you, Dr. Getz. This one is not new anywhere. We have had a problem with declining enrollment in the district for many years before COVID-19. Yet our district has declined to schools that are close to us. What are examples of school closure or reconfiguration in your prior experience? And how would you engage the community positively with this contentious task ahead?
So while I was an administrator in Austin and Atlanta, we did have to close schools. And with that work, we actually had a district-wide committee, representatives from across the district, that actually came together and looked at the problem the district was facing with low enrollment in some of our schools because the enrollment had dropped in the district, and make recommendations on what actions the district should take. And that included which schools made the most sense to close in the district. After that recommendation came forward from the district-wide committee and the plan was approved by the district, I was one of the people responsible for meeting with communities that would possibly be impacted by the school closures to share why the school closure, the cost to the district, how those expenditures would be reallocated to benefit students, how students would be rezoned for another school, and to listen to any questions the community had and develop and publish frequently asked questions document. Of course, it's always very personal to each community when schools close. And so there was pushback. We continue to work to help with the understanding of why. And eventually the communities accepted and the schools were closed. But there is work involved with closing schools, and you have to make sure that that is the option that's necessary. I think school closure should always be a last resort. And so I would want to make sure that we have a strong plan and that we really understand why students have left and are leaving the district and where they're going. And sometimes, as opposed to closing schools, you can replicate and innovate and provide programming that will bring students back. And that's why I feel closure is and should be a last resort after you find out why families are leaving, where they're going, and if there's anything the district can do to mitigate further declining enrollment and actually bring families back. It is my goal, if hired as superintendent, to work to make Salt Lake City School District a destination district that is attractive to commuters, to the community, and those taxpayers who have chosen to take their students out of the district in hopes that they would bring them back.
Thank you, sir. I've spent a little time on that subject, so I smile. Please explain your plan for effective school closures that will address declining enrollment. I know it's somewhat of a similar process, but how, in that whole process, and this is the real concern, please explain how you will effectively and efficiently integrate mental health services into the schools amongst that whole scenario. I think it also has to do with applying maybe some additional school resources.
So it's important that we implement a true student services model. And what that means is identifying staff like our school social workers, our school counselors, teachers, school leaders, school psychologists, and provide training and support for our teachers to be able to identify students in need of support, to provide an opportunity for parents to request support and opportunities for students to request support. Also educating other students that if they have friends that they feel are in need, to reach out and let an adult know so that we can make contact with the student and follow up. But that true student services model means those individuals that I named work with students to determine what services are needed to support that student. And sometimes we can provide those services in-house in the school district. Other times we might have to refer that student outside to a nonprofit or an agency or some department to provide help for that student. And in that instance, you have to provide case management. Case management would be to determine if we are providing the services in the district, are the services effectively meeting the student's needs? And if we refer the student out, did the family make contact with that referral? And if so, are the services that are being provided being effective and addressing the student need? And then lastly, I shared with you my personal project where I'd like to see mental health therapists in each of our schools so that we have those trained therapists that are able to provide support and become a part of that student services team that I referred to at the beginning of my response.
Thank Thank you, sir. What do you see as the most efficient way to create an equitable education approach? Let me start again. What do you see as the most efficient way to create an equitable education approach among our student population? And how would you help to implement this?
Can you repeat that?
Absolutely. What do you see as the most efficient way to create an equitable education approach among student populations? And then how would you help to implement this?
And so I believe that we have got to make sure that we're providing rigorous instruction for all students and providing opportunities to access that rigorous instruction, putting supports in place for students who would not typically take advantage of those programs, and working with parents to understand that we have the students back when we actually recommend the student for that programming. But also looking at intervention that students would need in the building. We have a governance process, a shared governance process in place that allows schools to innovate and hire staff that is needed for buildings. And so it's important that we work with staff and provide them with the dollars that are needed to provide for the needs of the students in that building, with the expectation that we're providing rigorous instruction, that we're meeting the needs of all students, that we're providing a standards aligned curriculum, that we have rigorous formative assessments in place so we know at all times the level of mastery students have achieved, and data for teachers to make modifications in their instructional practices and instructional delivery so that students get it. That we provide opportunities for retakes for students, because it's not important how fast a student learns or masters, but that they actually do. And so providing that opportunity for mastery for students with appropriate supports, coaching in a school is extremely important.
Thank you. What do you see as the top priorities for the Salt Lake City School District, and how will you set about working on those?
So I think some of the top priorities are the pandemic and getting students back in school while allowing for student and parent choice. Focus on the district's budget to make sure that we have the resources we need to provide what our students or meet our students' needs. To seek an understanding of why students have left the district this year and where they've gone, and what we can do to stop that student loss and actually bring students back into our district. Compacting curriculum or coming up with other plans for how we can fill foundational gaps for students while we allow them to move forward with on grade level or next class instruction, so that we're able to bridge that gap for students and so that they are able to have a successful school year. Working on narrowing the achievement gap. And I say narrowing because students who are highly focused and high achieving, we need to continue to move those students forward. And students who are not doing as well, we've got to move the floor. We've got to move those students forward so that we're continuing to move all of our students toward full mastery. And of course, focusing on increasing the graduation rate. The health of a district is usually measured by the graduation rate, and addressing the mental health needs of students and staff. And so working with student services staff, working with the business administrator Making sure we have a comprehensive graduation plan in place, K-12, because graduation readiness does not start when students enter high school in ninth grade. It starts when a student enters school at pre-K and kindergarten, and we make sure that they are ready to move to the next school level and the next level and be on grade level. That is truly getting our students ready for graduation. And so those are some of the things that I would focus on and that are priorities for me.
Thank you. Next question. We all know that there are times when certain groups of parents appear to have certain influence, or appear to have, that's a big word, appear to have certain influences on members of the school board or other influential places. How would you balance the concerns of all the parents and all the students alongside those that may have what is perceived to be extra access?
So it's important that our decisions are always about all students. And when you have an equity lens, there are questions that you ask to make sure that any decision benefits all students and not just a segment of students. If we say all, we truly have to mean all. And so always listening to all perspectives and not giving favor to anyone, but listening to all perspectives, being informed by the data and being open and transparent and sharing the data, relying on expert counsel, holding town halls to hear those perspectives and answer questions, involving stakeholders in decisions that will impact them, and always allowing choice. If there are parents who want their students, say, for instance, to return to school, and it's safe to do that, they should have that choice. But if there are parents who wish to have their students stay home and participate in remote learning, that choice is extremely important as well. And so until we receive guidance from the state that all students must be back full-time in person, I think it's important that the district embraces and allows parents and students to make the choice of the learning model that is most beneficial and effective for them. But always listening to all perspectives and then being able to respond with data and a very rational reason for the decision that is made.
Thank you, sir. And believe it or not, it's the last question. As a parent of 2 Salt Lake City School District students, and how would you, this was about how to balance the voices, but a step beyond that, how would you structure or offer a means for parents and students to have voices, either in their buildings or across the district?
So I believe in regular town hall meetings. It's just something that should happen where the district is able to provide information that's impacting communities, as well as to hear the questions. That is extreme, hear and answer questions that are out there. You might not always be able to answer questions in the moment, but being able to create frequently asked questions documents for those questions that you can't answer and that you have answered in those town hall meetings inform parents. So regular town hall meetings and providing voice. And when I say town hall meetings, not expecting people to always come to the district office, but actually going where families are so that everyone has access and everyone has an opportunity to share their voice and their perspective and hear from the superintendent, cabinet members, and the board are extremely important to me. And it helps us to stay in front of concerns, to be able to answer concerns in a timely manner, and to know what our stakeholders expect from us to inform the decisions that we are making in a very proactive manner.
Dr. Gadsden, I fibbed. There is one more. So forgive me. It's actually a really good one. What are your goals for the Salt Lake City School District?
So I'm supposed to have goals, huh? No,
No,
I'm joking. I'm joking. So my goals are very clear: to make sure that we are addressing the pandemic and how it has impacted our students, to make sure that the district has the financial resources to address those needs, to find out where the students are that have left the district and figure out what we can do to get them to return and stop that exodus, to get students back in school full time safely. That is definitely a goal of mine, to work with curriculum staff and others to develop a compact of curriculum or some other options to help catch students up in a sense and fill those foundational gaps that have been the result of the pandemic, to increase the graduation rate, to narrow the opportunity and achievement gap in the district, to implement a comprehensive school improvement and transformation plan at our lowest performing schools, to develop a comprehensive mental health support model for our district that could be a model for our state, and to recruit and retain a diverse workforce that is representative of our students. When students see people that look like them, they know that it's possible. And this is a goal of mine to grow our own. If we want to make sure that we continue to have a strong education system, we have got to grow our own and encourage students that are in our classes right now to become teachers. And the way we do that is to help students to see people who look like themselves, to know that it's possible.
Dr. Gadsden, there are no more surprises.
Okay.
Congratulations. Take a
Thank
deep
you.
breath. I want to say to all the community members out there or those that will watch this, thank you so much for making time. You all know much better than I how important this decision is for you, your children, your community, and your community's future. We have assisted your Board of Education to bring you extremely qualified candidates as finalists. And as the board gets ready to make their decision, you have a great opportunity. Now, if you, even on the live stream, there's a place where you see where you can go. But if you're not sure, go to the Salt Lake City School District website, click on the search bar, and there will be a place for you to respond to the impression form, the impression questionnaire, and share your comments about Dr. Gadsden. And if you were with us yesterday and the day before, about the other two candidates. So please make your voice heard. Your board will not make a decision without looking at your responses. This is your chance to have a great deal of influence on who your next educational leader is. Thank you all for watching. And most significantly, Dr. Gadsden, thank you for sharing your outstanding thoughts with us. I'm sure the Salt Lake City community has been delighted to have you with them.
Thank you.
All the best and Godspeed.